The next morning, the colony awoke to a crisp sky and the soft hum of daily activity. Farmers tended to their crops while children played along the edges of cleared land. Aaron, however, did not join them. He rose before dawn and made his way back to the forest, guided by instinct. The encounter with Rena the previous night had left a mark on him. He could not shake the memory of her glowing eyes or the intensity of the bond she had begun to form with him. Something inside him told him that the danger approaching was closer than anyone suspected, and he needed her guidance more than ever. As he entered the forest, sunlight streamed through the branches, casting long shadows across the mossy ground. He found Rena waiting at the usual clearing, her silver fur glinting in the light. She crouched low, tail brushing the soil, and her eyes reflected the first rays of the sun. When she saw him, she gave a small nod, a gesture of recognition and trust. Aaron approached slowly, careful not to startle her. "We need to prepare," he said quietly. "Something is coming, and I think it will be here soon." Rena tilted her head, her ears flicking in thought. Then she stepped closer, brushing against his arm in a sign of assurance. Rena led him deeper into the forest, to a place Aaron had never dared to explore. The trees were taller here, older, and their roots twisted together, forming natural tunnels and hidden pathways. Aaron followed silently, watching how Rena moved with incredible grace. She seemed to know every tree, every branch, every hidden nook. Aaron realized that she was more than just strong. She had a connection to the forest itself, as if it obeyed her commands. Birds and small creatures scattered as she passed, yet she left no lasting trace of her presence. Finally, they arrived at a wide clearing, encircled by thick trees. In the center stood a series of stone formations, weathered by time but arranged in a deliberate pattern. Rena gestured toward them, indicating that this was a place of importance. Aaron examined the stones and noticed carvings that resembled constellations and symbols he could not recognize. Rena placed her hands on the stones, tracing the carvings with sharp claws. She spoke in broken words. "Plan, defense, raiders." Aaron listened carefully, piecing together her meaning. The place was a strategic location, a natural vantage point to observe the colony and the surrounding forest. Aaron nodded, understanding the urgency. "We can use this to watch them before they get too close," he said. Rena responded with a soft growl, a sound that carried agreement and satisfaction. Over the next several hours, they mapped the surrounding forest. Aaron marked pathways that could be used to move quickly, while Rena indicated areas where they could hide or create natural traps. The synergy between human and wolf girl became evident. Each had strengths the other lacked, and together they could plan more than either could alone. As they worked, Aaron asked her questions about her people. Rena explained that her kind had once protected the forests of this world, living in harmony with nature. They had skills humans had never developed: heightened senses, incredible agility, and the ability to communicate with the land in subtle ways. But her people had been nearly destroyed by a group of raiders who sought to conquer their worlds and claim resources. Rena had survived by hiding, learning to move silently and avoiding capture. She had watched the colony for days before choosing Aaron. She had seen courage and a sense of justice in him, qualities rare among humans she had observed. By mid-afternoon, Aaron and Rena had completed a detailed plan. They would set up observation points, prepare the settlers for a possible attack without revealing the full danger, and use the forest itself as a natural defense. Aaron was surprised at how effective the plan was. Rena suggested using the terrain to funnel any attackers into narrow pathways, where their numbers would count for little. She also indicated places where they could hide supplies and water, ensuring the colony could survive if cut off. Rena then demonstrated some of her skills. She climbed a tall tree in seconds, disappearing from view, and leapt down to land silently in front of Aaron. She moved with such speed and precision that it left him breathless. "You need to trust instinct," she said, her voice soft. "Forest tells everything." Aaron tried to mimic her movements, but he stumbled and fell, laughing at his own clumsiness. Rena tilted her head, then nudged him gently, encouraging him. She showed him how to listen to the subtle sounds of the forest, how to notice slight changes in the wind, and how to predict movement based on shadows and rustling leaves. As evening approached, the sky deepened into shades of violet and red. Aaron and Rena returned to the colony cautiously. He observed the settlers going about their daily routines, unaware of the danger approaching. Aaron felt a strange mixture of protectiveness and anxiety. He could not yet reveal Rhina to everyone, not until he was certain they would understand her value. He had already faced disbelief and mockery when he tried to explain her existence. This time he decided he would wait, gather proof, and act when necessary. That night he returned to the forest alone to check the perimeter, as Rhina had instructed. He walked silently, recalling her lessons. Each sound, each movement seemed amplified. The forest no longer felt ordinary. It felt alive in a way he had never noticed before. He paused at a small creek, listening for ripples or footsteps. The night was calm, yet he could sense a tension in the air, a warning that the calm would not last. He knew that when the raiders arrived, the first strike would be swift and unexpected. Suddenly, a noise broke the silence. A branch snapped somewhere deeper in the woods. Aaron froze, remembering the growl of the previous night. Then he saw movement in the shadows. A figure stepped forward. It was Rhina, her fur reflecting the moonlight. She approached him with a silent grace, stopping just short of him. Her eyes glowed amber, and she lowered her head slightly, a gesture of reassurance. Aaron felt his pulse quicken. He realized how much he had come to rely on her presence. She was not just an ally. She was a guide, a protector, and perhaps a friend. Rhina led Aaron to a hidden hollow beneath an old oak tree. Inside there was a small nest of soft leaves and moss. Aaron crouched, examining the space. Rhina gestured toward a set of carvings on the wall of the hollow. They depicted scenes of her people's battles, hunts, and rituals. Aaron traced the carvings with his fingers, feeling a connection to the past. He understood that Rhina's people had not been weak. They had been strategic, intelligent, and deeply connected to their environment. She had survived not just because of strength, but because of knowledge and instinct passed down through generations. They spent the night in the hollow, sharing stories and plans. Aaron told Rhina about the colony, the settlers, and their routines. She listened intently, occasionally tilting her head or making a soft growl to indicate understanding. Aaron realized that this bond was more than one-sided. Rhina trusted him to carry knowledge back to the colony and to act with wisdom. In turn, he trusted her to guide him and keep him safe in the forest. They fell into a quiet rhythm, two beings learning from each other, preparing for what was to come. Morning arrived with a faint mist over the forest. Aaron and Rhina moved through the trees, checking the routes they had marked the day before. The forest seemed more alive than ever, responding to Rhina's presence. Birds took flight, small animals scurried away, and even the wind seemed to shift slightly as they passed. Aaron felt a thrill of power and responsibility. He was learning to see the world in a new way, to understand the delicate balance of nature and strategy that Rhina had mastered. By midday, they had returned to the colony. Aaron approached cautiously, carrying a message from Rhina to the leaders. He spoke carefully, describing strange tracks, signs of movement, and the intelligence of the creature in the forest. At first, the colonists resisted, but when Aaron demonstrated knowledge that only someone who had observed the forest closely could know, they began to listen. Rhina stepped forward, emerging from the trees with her glowing eyes fixed on the settlers. There was a tense moment of silence. The colonists stared, unsure whether to trust her. Then Rhina demonstrated her speed and strength, moving through the clearing and showing them that she could act with precision and control. The settlers' skepticism slowly turned into respect. Aaron stood beside her, explaining that she had chosen him and that her knowledge could save them. It was a turning point. For the first time, the colony began to understand that the forest was not just a dangerous place, but also a source of protection and power if guided correctly. As evening fell, Aaron and Rhina returned to the forest, leaving the colonists to digest what they had seen. Aaron felt a sense of purpose growing within him. The bond between him and Rhina was no longer a secret or a curiosity. It was a partnership, a union of human courage and alien instinct. He knew that together they could face the dangers ahead and protect the colony from the threats that loomed beyond the horizon. That night, as stars filled the sky, Aaron and Rhina sat together at their hidden hollow, listening to the sounds of the forest. The rustle of leaves, the distant call of birds, and the whisper of wind through the trees became a symphony of preparation. Aaron felt ready, not just for the coming danger, but for the adventure and challenges that lay ahead. With Rhina by his side, he was no longer just a scout. He was part of something greater, something powerful. The planet of Virel had always been wild and dangerous, a place where the strongest survived and the weak were forgotten. Jagged mountains pierced the sky, and thick forests stretched for miles, filled with creatures that could tear a grown human apart in seconds. But in the middle of this chaos, a city had grown, a city ruled by strength, courage, and a strict code of honor. This city belonged to the Beast Folk, a fierce alien race whose warriors were tall, muscular, and covered with tough animal-like skin. Among them, one stood above all others, Raka, the Beastwoman whose skill in battle was legendary. Raka's victories were known throughout the planet. She had faced hundreds of challengers in the arena, each hoping to claim her position as champion. None had succeeded. Her claws were sharp, her reflexes quick, and her mind as clever as her body was strong. But strength alone was not enough in this world. Every battle required strategy, awareness, and respect for the ancient rules. Victory meant more than surviving. It meant gaining honor, and for Raka, that honor was tied to a prize she could claim from any defeated opponent. On the morning of the great arena battle, the sun rose red over Virel. Smoke from distant fires curled into the sky, and the cries of creatures echoed through the valley. Citizens of the city gathered, filling the stands with excitement and anticipation. The air was thick with tension, and a low hum of conversation rippled through the crowd. Today, the challenge was special. Not only would Raka face the best warriors of her tribe, but a human had also arrived on the planet, drawn by the stories of her might. The human, a soldier named Dan, stepped into the arena with nothing but his courage, a few simple tools, and an unshakable determination. He was small compared to the towering beast folk with narrow shoulders and quick legs, but his eyes burned with focus. Humans were known among some alien tribes as clever and adaptable, but many considered them weak. Dan would have to prove otherwise if he hoped to survive this day. Raka entered the arena last, her presence commanding attention. She was taller than any other warrior, her muscles coiled and ready, her eyes glowing with determination. Her claws gleamed in the sunlight, and the crowd roared as she lifted her head high. Her long tail swayed behind her, balancing each movement. For her, this fight was more than a contest. It was a test of her leadership, her skill, and her honor. She had never lost, and she intended to keep it that way. The first challenger, a male beast folk named Tharok, stepped forward. He was strong and fast, but no match for Raka's experience. The battle began with a clash of claws and strikes. Raka moved with precision, dodging attacks and countering with swift, powerful blows. Within minutes, Tharok was defeated and the crowd cheered. Raka's reputation remained unbroken, and the other challengers watched with fear and respect. Then it was time for Dan. He stood at the edge of the arena, feeling the weight of 1,000 eyes on him. He could see Raka, a living mountain of power and grace waiting. The ground beneath his feet was rough, but he had trained for this moment. He took a deep breath, steadying himself, and stepped forward, Raka's gaze fixed on him. She tilted her head slightly, almost curious. A human? Could such a small creature even pose a threat? She let out a low growl, a sound that made the air vibrate, and crouched into her battle stance. The arena fell silent, waiting for the first move. Dan knew he could not match Raka in strength. His arms were no match for her claws, and his legs could not carry him through a direct clash. Instead, he relied on speed, agility, and clever thinking. He darted forward, avoiding her first strike by a hair's breadth. Raka's claws swiped where he had stood a moment before, striking the ground with a force that sent small rocks flying. The human moved like water, slipping through openings and keeping his distance. He used small tools he had carried, a short rope, a net, and a few smoke capsules. Raka watched, intrigued and slightly irritated. Most challengers rushed to attack and were crushed in seconds. Dan did not rush. He observed, calculated, and acted at the perfect moment. Raka lunged again, her claws slicing through the air. Dan rolled to the side and released a small smoke capsule. The arena filled with thick white smoke. For a moment, Raka could not see him. She hissed, swinging blindly, trying to anticipate his movement. Dan used the confusion to his advantage, moving behind her and setting a simple trap, a loop of rope designed to catch her tail. Raka roared as she felt the rope tighten, but she did not panic. She used her strength to break free, spinning in a powerful motion that sent Dan skidding across the dirt. Both paused, breathing heavily. The crowd was on its feet, cheering, shouting, and gasping at the unexpected turn. No human had ever lasted this long in the arena. and none had dared to challenge Raka with such intelligence. Dan scrambled to his feet, realizing he needed a new approach. He could not fight her directly, and he could not outmuscle her. So he decided to use her own strength against her. He studied her movements, noticing the way she balanced, the rhythm of her attacks, and the slight moments where she paused to calculate. Every fighter has a pattern, and every pattern can be predicted. Raka, sensing the shift, tensed. She realized that this human was not like the others. He was learning, adapting, and finding ways to turn her power into something she could not control. She struck again, faster this time, and Dan ducked just in time. His heart pounded, but he stayed focused. Minutes turned into half an hour, and still neither had fallen. The crowd was in awe. Even Raka's fellow warriors watched silently, amazed by the human's courage and skill. For the first time, someone had matched her in endurance and intelligence. Raka's respect for him began to grow, though she would never admit it aloud. Finally, the moment came. Dan feigned a stumble, drawing Raka into a false attack. She lunged, expecting him to be off balance. Instead, he rolled under her arm, tripping her slightly with his rope. Raka stumbled but did not fall. She twisted midair, claws ready, and caught him by the shoulder. Both were breathing heavily, eyes locked. Then something unexpected happened. Dan spoke, his voice steady and clear. "I do not want gold, I do not want land. I want peace between our people." Raka froze. No challenger had ever asked for anything like this. A prize, according to their laws, was something tangible, a symbol of victory. Yet here was a human standing before her, daring to claim a prize of understanding and peace. The arena went silent. Raka's tail twitched, her claws lowered slightly. The crowd murmured, confused and intrigued. The human's words were strange, almost foolish, yet there was a strength in them that could not be denied. Raka considered her options. She could strike him down and claim victory as usual, but something in Dan's gaze, something in the way he stood unafraid before her, made her hesitate. Was there honor in crushing a human who sought only to stop future bloodshed? Could her tribe accept a prize that was not gold, not land, not jewels, but a promise of peace? For the first time in her life, Raka felt uncertainty. It was not fear, but curiosity mixed with respect. She studied Dan, noting the courage it took to stand against her and the wisdom it took to ask for something so unusual. Slowly she released him, stepping back and lowering her claws completely. "You are strange," she said, her voice a low rumble that carried across the arena. "Most would run, most would fight blindly. You ask for peace. You are either very clever or very foolish." "I choose clever," Dan replied. "If we fight only for strength, both our people will lose. Together we can survive and maybe even thrive." Raka's ears twitched. She had never thought of her victories in this way. Strength alone had always been the measure of honor. But perhaps there was more to honor than defeating every opponent. Perhaps wisdom, courage, and the desire to protect more than oneself could be a prize worthy of respect. The crowd, initially silent, erupted into whispers and cheers. Some were confused, some skeptical, but many were intrigued by the human's boldness. Raka's tribe watched in stunned silence, unsure how to react to a prize that was not a physical object, but an idea. Raka stepped forward and extended her hand, not a hand of attack, but a gesture of acknowledgement. "Very well, human. I will honor your prize. You will have your peace, and we will see if your people can live alongside mine without bloodshed." Dan nodded. "Thank you. I promise our people will try. Together we can face whatever comes next." The sun climbed higher in the sky, casting long shadows across the arena. Today marked not only a battle, but the beginning of something new. For Raka, the greatest warrior of Virel, this was a test of more than strength. It was a test of understanding, courage, and the power of choice. And for Dan, the human who dared to challenge a legend, it was the start of a journey that could change the fate of both their worlds. The great arena battle had ended, but the true story was only beginning. Raka and Dan, so different in every way, had found a path forward, a path where strength met wisdom and courage met respect. And in that path lay the possibility of a future where humans and beast folk could stand together, not as enemies, but as allies. The wind carried the sound of cheers across the city, but inside Raka's mind a new question had taken root. Could she, the undefeated champion, learn from a human and lead her people into a new age? Could a prize of peace be worth more than any victory she had ever claimed? The first light of dawn spread across the jagged mountains surrounding Virel. The city walls glimmered faintly as scouts reported movement in the forest. Enemy tribes were approaching, their warriors numerous and well-armed. The ground trembled as the distant footsteps grew louder, and the air was filled with tension. For Raka and Dan, this was the moment they had prepared for, a chance to test the alliance they had forged and the strategies they had developed. Raka stood atop the highest wall, her claws gripping the edge. Her eyes scanned the horizon, noting every shadow, every ripple in the treetops. Beside her, Dan held a small device, a human tool adapted to detect subtle movements in the forest. He adjusted it carefully, nodding as the readings confirmed the approaching enemy forces. "They are closer than I expected," Dan said, "but not yet within range of our traps. We still have time to fine-tune our defenses." Raka's tail swished slowly. "Good. Then let us ensure that when they arrive, they find a city ready for anything. Strength alone will not win this fight. Strategy will." The beast folk warriors moved quickly along the walls, taking their positions. Some carried heavy weapons, others stationed themselves with long-range tools. Dan moved among them, demonstrating how to use the terrain to their advantage. He showed them where to hide, how to set tripwires, and how to communicate silently through signals. Many of the younger warriors absorbed his lessons quickly, while the older ones grumbled but followed orders. Raka observed quietly, noting how her people responded. Some were hesitant, unsure of these unfamiliar tactics, but as the minutes passed, confidence grew. Even the most skeptical warriors began to see the value in combining strength with clever planning. At midday, the first scouts of the enemy tribe appeared at the edge of the forest. They were careful, moving in small groups, testing the defenses of the city. Raka signaled to the warriors stationed along the walls. "Hold your positions. Wait for my command." Dan pointed to a narrow valley that led toward the city. "If they move through there, they will trigger our traps. The first few will be slowed, giving us the advantage." The scouts stepped cautiously into the valley. A tripwire snapped under the weight of one of them, sending a small net flying upward. The scout struggled, momentarily caught as others tried to help. Raka allowed a small smirk. Even a minor trap could change the flow of battle. The enemy scouts retreated, signaling to their main force. It was clear that they had not expected the city to be so prepared. Raka's ears twitched as she noted their surprise. This was already working better than she had hoped. As the main enemy force moved forward, Dan adjusted his strategy. "We will split their numbers," he said. "Use the traps to channel them into areas where our strongest fighters are waiting. We can control the flow of the battle." Raka nodded, approving his plan. "Good, we will fight smart, not just hard. Let the enemy underestimate us and they will fall into our hands." The first wave of attackers entered the traps set along the forest edge. Tripwires, nets, and hidden pits slowed their advance. Some stumbled, some fell, and others hesitated, unsure how to proceed. Raka's warriors took advantage, striking with precise timing. They moved together, coordinated and efficient, following Dan's guidance as well as their own instincts. Raka herself led a small squad into the center of the valley. Her claws moved like lightning. Her tail balanced every motion. She struck with strength and skill, but also with purpose, guiding the flow of battle rather than seeking unnecessary kills. The human strategies were proving effective, and she felt a sense of satisfaction in combining her might with clever tactics. Meanwhile, Dan stayed behind the front lines, observing and directing. He used signals to communicate with the warriors, guiding them to intercept enemy groups and adjust to unexpected movements. His calm presence kept the defenders focused even under pressure. As the day wore on, the enemy realized that their initial tactics were failing. Their numbers were larger, but they were disorganized, caught in traps, and funneled into narrow paths where the defenders could control their movements. Panic began to spread among them as Raka's warriors advanced with precision and teamwork. Raka noticed a group of enemy leaders trying to coordinate a counterattack. She signaled to Dan. "They are attempting to regroup. We should disrupt them before they gain control." Dan quickly analyzed the situation. "Use the forest edges. Lead a small group through hidden paths to flank them. I will signal the others to cut off retreat." Raka nodded and led a team through the dense trees. Their movements were swift and silent, striking the enemy from unexpected directions. Chaos spread among the attackers as they realized they were surrounded on multiple sides. Raka's strength and Dan's tactics combined perfectly, proving that humans and beast folk could fight together effectively. Back on the city walls, the defenders continued to hold the line. Young warriors, inspired by the success of their leaders, moved confidently, following the plans they had practiced for days. Each trap worked as intended, slowing enemy movements and creating opportunities for precise strikes. As the battle intensified, Raka's respect for Dan grew. His strategies had saved countless lives, and the way he adapted to unexpected situations was impressive. She realized that strength alone could not have won this fight. It was their combined skills, human ingenuity, and beastfolk power that made victory possible. Hours passed, and the enemy force began to falter. Their leaders were captured or driven back, their warriors exhausted and confused. Raka stood at the center of the battlefield, her eyes scanning the remaining attackers. "It is almost over," she said. "We must push forward carefully and decisively," Dan agreed. "Focus on separating them. Don't let them regroup. Use your strength to break their morale, but keep the younger fighters safe." Raka roared, signaling a final push. Her warriors surged forward with precision, striking at the enemy from multiple directions. Traps and obstacles created confusion, while Raka and her strongest fighters led the charge. The enemy, overwhelmed and disoriented, began to retreat. By late afternoon, the battlefield was quiet. The surviving enemy forces fled, leaving behind those who had fallen or been captured. The city had been defended successfully, and the people of Virel had witnessed the power of unity and strategy. Raka stood among her warriors, breathing heavily but proud. She glanced at Dan, who gave a small nod of approval. "You fought well," she said. "Not just with strength, but with wisdom. Your presence has made my people stronger." Dan smiled. "And your people have taught me courage, endurance, and honor. Together we have done more than either of us could have alone." The citizens of Virel emerged from the walls, cheering and celebrating their victory. They had seen firsthand that humans and beastfolk could work together and achieve what neither could alone. Young warriors approached Dan with curiosity and respect, asking questions and seeking guidance. Even the skeptical elders began to recognize the value of his methods. Raka walked through the city streets, feeling a sense of fulfillment. The battle had proven more than survival. It had proven the power of cooperation, respect, and trust. For the first time, she understood that a prize could be more than gold or land. It could be knowledge, wisdom, and a shared future. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the city, Raka and Dan met at the center of the square. They watched as the citizens celebrated, realizing that this victory was a beginning, not an end. "There will be more challenges," Raka said quietly. "Other tribes will not forget this defeat. They will seek revenge." Dan nodded. "Then we will be ready. Together we can face whatever comes next." Strength and wisdom united. Raka's tail flicked in agreement. "Yes, this is only the start. But today we have shown that courage, strategy, and cooperation can overcome even the greatest threats. Your prize, your peace, has proven more valuable than any victory I have ever claimed." The night settled over Virel, calm for the first time in days. Fires burned in the city, and the people sang songs of triumph. Raka and Dan stood together, knowing that the battles to come would test their alliance even further. Yet they were ready, strengthened by mutual respect, trust, and the shared goal of protecting their people. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight was a night of learning and victory. The Beastwoman and the human had shown that differences could be strengths, and that courage and cleverness could create a force more powerful than brute strength alone. Raka looked at Dan once more, her expression thoughtful. "Perhaps the prize of peace is the greatest prize of all." Dan nodded, smiling faintly. "And perhaps the greatest strength is knowing when to fight together, not against each other." The victory at the valley had given the city of Virel a sense of pride, but it also brought a sharp awareness of the dangers that lay beyond their walls. While the citizens celebrated, Raka and Dan knew that the enemy would not remain defeated for long. The tribes they had repelled were clever and relentless, and their desire for revenge would grow stronger with each passing day. Raka stood on the highest wall of the city, looking toward the distant forests where the enemy had disappeared. Her tail flicked slowly as she considered the next steps. Dan stood beside her, reviewing the maps and scouting reports. Together they had won a battle, but the war was far from over. "We cannot let them recover and gather more forces," Dan said. "If they return in greater numbers, even our defenses may not hold. We need to prepare for multiple attacks at once," Raka nodded. Then we must train harder, plan better, and anticipate every possible move. Our people have learned strategy, but they must now learn endurance as well. They must be ready for a long conflict. Over the next several days, Raka and Dan organized rigorous training sessions. The younger warriors practiced tirelessly, learning to move as a unit, using signals to coordinate attacks and working together to set traps quickly. Older warriors who had initially doubted Dan's strategies began to see their value, and even they started to participate with enthusiasm. Raka spent hours with the strongest fighters, combining her own combat techniques with Dan's methods. They practiced ambushes, defensive formations, and tactics that used the city's walls and surrounding terrain to maximum advantage. Each exercise tested the warriors' skills, their teamwork, and their ability to think quickly under pressure. Meanwhile, Dan worked on broader strategies, scouting the surrounding lands and gathering intelligence about potential enemy movements. He trained a group of scouts to observe enemy positions, track their numbers, and report subtle signs of incoming attacks. Using these reports, he and Raka could adjust their defensive plans and position their forces for maximum effectiveness. Despite the focus on training, tensions remained. Some citizens still questioned the human's role in their city. A few whispered that relying on his strategies was risky, and that strength alone should have been enough to protect them. Raka addressed these concerns directly. "Strength alone does not guarantee survival," she said firmly. "Wisdom, preparation, and unity are equally important. This human has shown us ways to protect ourselves that we would never have discovered on our own. If you refuse to adapt, you risk losing everything we have fought to defend." Her words silenced the doubters. Raka had earned the respect of her people through countless victories, and when she spoke, her authority was unquestioned. Slowly, the warriors and citizens began to embrace the new methods, understanding that their lives depended on more than just brute force. One afternoon, while Raka and Dan reviewed the positions of their forces, a young warrior named Tira approached them. She carried a report from scouts who had observed unusual movements in the distance. "The enemy is gathering again," she said. "They are more organized than before, and it seems they are uniting multiple tribes for a larger attack." Raka's ears twitched. "How many?" she asked. "Too many to count precisely," Tira replied. "But they will arrive within 3 days if they keep this pace." Dan studied the report carefully. "This is serious," he said. "We will need to reinforce every position, ensure the traps are ready, and prepare our warriors for continuous engagement. We cannot allow them to take the initiative." Raka clenched her claws. "Then we will not. We will meet them head-on and show them that Virel is not easily defeated. We fight not for glory but for our people and our future." That evening, the city prepared for a long night. Fires burned along the walls, torches lit the streets, and scouts moved silently through the forests. Raka and Dan coordinated with every unit, ensuring that each warrior knew their role and every trap was in place. The air was tense, filled with anticipation and determination. During a quiet moment, Dan approached Raka. "Your people have learned quickly," he said. "They are ready to face the challenge. But remember, even the best strategies require adaptability. The enemy may do something unexpected." Raka nodded. "I understand. That is why we have trained them to think, not just to follow orders. They are ready, human. I am confident in them, and in you." The next morning, scouts reported the first signs of the approaching enemy. Dust rose in the distance as the massive force moved closer, more organized and coordinated than before. Raka and Dan quickly reviewed their positions, adjusting traps and formations to account for the larger numbers. The enemy approached cautiously, aware of the city's defenses but confident in their strength. They believed that sheer numbers would overcome any obstacles, but they underestimated the combination of human strategy and beast folk power. As the enemy reached the edge of the first defensive line, traps were triggered. Nets lifted attackers off the ground, tripwires sent others sprawling, and pits caught those who were careless. Confusion spread quickly through the ranks of the invaders. Raka's warriors struck with precision, taking advantage of the chaos to separate groups and prevent them from regrouping. Dan directed the defenders from a high vantage point, using signals to coordinate movements and adjust tactics in real time. He anticipated enemy reactions, guiding the warriors to counter-maneuvers and exploit weaknesses. The enemy leaders tried to rally their forces, but they struggled against the combined intelligence and strength of Raka's people. Raka herself led a strike team into the heart of the enemy formation. Her claws moved like lightning. Her tail balanced every motion, and her strategy was flawless. She used the terrain to her advantage, forcing the enemy into narrow paths where their numbers became less useful. Every movement was calculated, designed to maximize efficiency and minimize risk to her own warriors. Despite their preparation, the enemy was persistent. They adapted quickly, attempting to flank the defenders and overwhelm them with concentrated attacks. But Dan's foresight and Raka's leadership allowed the city to respond effectively. They repositioned forces, reinforced weak points, and used traps strategically to maintain control of the battlefield. Hours passed in intense combat. The city's defenders held their ground, pushing back the enemy while sustaining minimal losses. Raka observed the flow of battle, her mind calculating every possibility. She realized that this was more than a fight for survival. It was a test of leadership, teamwork, and the lessons they had learned together. During a brief lull, Dan moved to Raka's side. "They are stronger than before, but our forces are disciplined and coordinated. If we maintain focus, we can force them to retreat again." Raka's eyes narrowed. "Then we will. This is not just about defense. We must show them that Virel is prepared for any threat. Strength and strategy together will protect our people." As the sun began to set, the final push came. The enemy concentrated their remaining forces in an attempt to break through the city's defenses. Raka and Dan quickly adjusted their tactics, using reserves to reinforce key positions and guiding the warriors to exploit enemy weaknesses. The battle reached its climax in the valley near the city gates. Raka's team engaged the strongest enemy warriors directly, using a combination of agility, strength, and clever maneuvers. Dan signals coordinated supporting units, ensuring that reinforcements arrived at critical moments to maintain pressure on the enemy. One by one, the enemy leaders fell or were captured, their remaining forces scattering in disarray. Raka's warriors pressed forward, preventing regrouping and ensuring that the retreating enemies could not organize another attack immediately. By nightfall, the battlefield was quiet once again. The enemy had been repelled, suffering significant losses, and the city of Virel remained intact. The citizens emerged cautiously, checking on their warriors and surveying the damage. The victories of the day were hard-earned, but the people had survived, stronger and more united than ever. Raka stood at the center of the city, surrounded by her warriors. She looked toward Dan, who had directed the battle with calm precision. "You have done well, human," she said. "Your strategies have saved lives and strengthened our people. Together we have proven that wisdom and courage can be as powerful as strength." Dan smiled. "And your people have fought with incredible skill and bravery. I could not have done this without you. This is a victory for everyone." The citizens of Virel gathered around, cheering for their defenders and acknowledging the unusual human who had played a crucial role. Young warriors approached Dan with questions and curiosity, eager to learn more about his strategies. Even the skeptics who had doubted the value of human methods now nodded in respect. As the celebrations continued, Raka reflected on the lessons of the past days. Strength alone had never been enough, and glory achieved through force could not protect the city for long. True power came from unity, strategy, and the willingness to learn from those who were different. Dan approached her quietly. "There will be more challenges," he said. "Other tribes may attempt to join forces against us. We must continue to prepare, adapt, and teach our people to think and act together." Raka nodded, her gaze steady. "Then we will. We have learned that victory is not only about defeating an enemy, but about protecting those who cannot fight alone." The morning sun rose over Virel, casting a golden light across the city walls. After days of preparation and skirmishes, the final wave of the enemy forces had arrived. These tribes had united into a massive army, stronger and more determined than any previous attackers. But the city was ready. Raka and Dan stood at the center of the walls, surrounded by warriors who had trained tirelessly under their guidance. Raka's eyes scanned the horizon. She could see hundreds of enemies moving through the forests and valleys, their banners marking the approach of a combined force. Her claws flexed, her muscles coiled with anticipation. This was the moment that would test every skill, every strategy, and every lesson her people had learned. Dan checked the positions of the scouts and messengers. "They are moving quickly but not recklessly," he observed. They expect to overwhelm us with numbers. We will show them that preparation and unity can outmatch brute force. Raka nodded. Then let us show them. Every warrior knows their role. Every trap is in place. Strength and strategy together will protect our city and our people. The first waves of the enemy attacked the outer defenses. Traps were triggered immediately. Nets lifted enemies off the ground, pits swallowed those who stepped carelessly, and concealed projectiles slowed the advance. Raka's warriors moved in coordination, striking with precision. Dan directed reinforcements and flanked enemy groups where necessary, his human strategies proving invaluable in the chaos. Despite the traps and clever maneuvers, the enemy pressed forward. They were skilled and determined, pushing through obstacles with brute force and numbers. The battle became intense and chaotic, with warriors on both sides clashing in the valleys and along the walls. Raka led from the front, her claws striking with deadly accuracy while her tail balanced every motion. She moved like a storm, strong and fearless, yet always aware of her surroundings and her people's safety. Dan moved through the battlefield with calm focus. He signaled to the warriors, adjusted defenses, and anticipated enemy moves. His knowledge of tactics and understanding of enemy behavior allowed the defenders to counter attacks quickly, turning dangerous situations into advantages. Hours passed as the battle raged. The city held firm, but the enemy's persistence and numbers tested every defender. Raka's warriors were exhausted, yet they fought with determination, inspired by their champion and the human who had earned their trust. Dan's strategies were proving effective, but the intensity of the assault demanded constant adaptation. At midday, Raka spotted a group of elite enemy warriors attempting to break through the city gates. Their size and strength were formidable, and they moved with coordinated precision. Raka realized that if they succeeded, the battle could turn. She signaled to Dan. "They are moving toward the gates," she said. "We must intercept them before they breach our defenses." Dan quickly analyzed the terrain. "We can lead them into the narrow alleyways near the gate. They will lose their advantage in numbers and strength there. Use the warriors stationed on the walls to support us." Raka led a strike team to the alleyways, using her strength and agility to block the enemy's advance. Her warriors followed, striking with speed and precision. The narrow paths limited the elite warriors' ability to move freely, giving the defenders the advantage. Dan coordinated the supporting units from above, signaling where attacks were needed and where reinforcements should move. His calm presence kept the defenders focused. Even under the most intense pressure, the elite enemy warriors fought fiercely, but they were outmatched by the combination of Raka's strength, her warriors' skill, and Dan's strategic guidance. One by one, they were captured or driven back. The city gates remained secure, and the momentum of the battle shifted in favor of the defenders. Raka paused briefly, catching her breath. She could see the remaining enemy forces beginning to falter. Their leaders had fallen, their numbers were dwindling, and their morale was breaking. She realized that the long days of preparation, training, and strategy had brought her people to this moment. Dan joined her. "They are losing cohesion," he said. "If we press forward carefully, we can force them to retreat completely." Raka nodded. "Then we will. But we must protect the citizens and our young warriors. No unnecessary risks." The defenders advanced, using coordinated movements to push the enemy back through the valley. Traps slowed the attackers, while the combined strength of Raka and her warriors struck decisively. The enemy, disorganized and overwhelmed, began to flee in multiple directions, leaving their fallen behind. By late afternoon, the battlefield was quiet once again. The enemy had been defeated, scattered across the valley, and the city of Virel stood unbroken. Raka's warriors cheered, exhausted but victorious. Dan smiled, knowing that their combined efforts had saved countless lives. The citizens emerged from the city, gathering around their defenders. They celebrated not only the victory, but also the lessons learned from the alliance between humans and beastfolk. Young warriors approached Dan, asking questions about his strategies and eager to learn more. Even the older warriors who had doubted him nodded in respect. Raka walked through the city streets, observing the relief and pride on her people's faces. She reflected on the battles, realizing that her victories were no longer about personal glory, but about protecting her people and ensuring their future. She glanced at Dan, who had earned the respect of her tribe through courage, wisdom, and unwavering determination. That evening, the city held a ceremony to honor the defenders. Raka and Dan stood together in the center of the square, surrounded by cheering citizens. The fires burned brightly, illuminating the faces of those who had fought and survived. Raka raised her voice. "Today we have proven that strength alone is not enough," she said. "We have shown that wisdom, courage, and cooperation can overcome even the greatest threats. Our people are stronger because we have learned to work together, to think and to protect one another." Dan stepped forward. "And we have shown that differences can be strengths. Humans and beast folk working together have defended this city. We have chosen not only to fight but to protect and prepare. That is the true measure of victory." The citizens cheered, their voices echoing across the city. Young warriors looked to Raka and Dan with admiration, inspired by their courage and leadership. Even the skeptics acknowledged the value of what had been accomplished. As the ceremony ended, Raka and Dan stood together, watching the city and its people. The battles had tested them, but they had emerged stronger, united, and prepared for whatever challenges lay ahead. Raka's mind returned to the prize that had begun this journey, the humans' request for peace. At first she had thought it strange, even foolish, but now she understood its true value. The prize had taught her the importance of wisdom, the power of cooperation, and the strength that came from choosing strategy alongside might. Dan spoke softly, breaking her thoughts. "The city is safe for now, but there will always be challenges. We must continue to teach, prepare, and protect. That is how we honor the prize," Raka nodded. "Yes, and we will. We have learned that the greatest victories are not measured by battles won, but by the lives we protect and the future we create." As night fell over Virel, the city was calm and peaceful. Fires burned in homes and public spaces, and the citizens rested, knowing that their leaders had guided them to safety. Raka and Dan stood together atop the highest wall, looking at the stars rising above the mountains. "Do you ever wonder what will come next?" Raka asked quietly. Dan smiled. "Perhaps, but I know that as long as we work together, we can face anything. Humans, beast folk, and all who value life and courage. Together we are stronger than any enemy." Raka's tail flicked in agreement. "Then let this be the start of a new era. Not one of endless battles and bloodshed, but of cooperation, wisdom, and strength used to protect those who cannot fight alone." The two stood in silence, listening to the distant sounds of the city. The wind carried the faint calls of nocturnal creatures, the soft murmurs of citizens settling into their homes, and the echo of warriors' laughter and conversation. It was a night of reflection, a night of calm, and a night of hope. Raka realized that the prize of peace was greater than any victory she had ever claimed in the arena. It had changed her perspective, strengthened her people, and shown that courage and wisdom together could overcome even the most daunting challenges. Dan looked at Raka, a quiet admiration in his eyes. "You have taught me as much as I have taught you," he said. "Strength, courage, honor, and the value of protecting others. That is what makes you a true leader." Raka inclined her head. "And you have taught me the value of thinking beyond brute force, of using the mind as well as the body. Together we have shown that the future can be brighter when we work together." As the night deepened, the stars shone brightly over Virel. The city, its people, and its warriors rested, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. But for now they could celebrate the true victory, the power of cooperation, wisdom, courage, and the humans' unusual prize that had transformed the course of their lives. In the days that followed, the city strengthened further. Using the lessons learned in the battle, Dan continued to teach strategies, scouting techniques, and methods for long-term defense. Raka continued to lead her people with courage and skill, blending